The first and second atomic bombs were dropped into Hiroshima, Japan on August 6, 1945, and Nagasaki, Japan on August 11, 1945, in order to stop the conflict between the United States and Japan during World War II. The tragedy of the bomb droppings caused a horrific amount of deaths and damage to Japan and its inhabitants. However, the triumph of these events led to the ending of the war and the reformation of Japan. The conflict between Japan and the United States initially started with the Pearl Harbor bombing on December 7, 1941. Japan decided to initiate the attack because the United States Congress placed an embargo on Japan, which deprived them of natural resources like oil, minerals, and steel. Also, President Roosevelt moved the U.S. Pacific Fleet from California to Pearl Harbor in 1939. This move was a threat to Japan, who wanted to expand in the Pacific. Japan's bombs took the lives of more than 2,500 Americans and destroyed 18 ships and about 300 airplanes. The next day, President Roosevelt made his historic infamy speech.
December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
And war was declared between the United States and Japan an hour later. Flash forward toward the end of the war. Japan and the United States had been fighting for 4 years, with Japan showing no signs of surrender. The Allies decided that it was time to do something. So on July 26, 1945, President Harry Truman, Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and China's government leader Chiang Kai-shek met in Potsdam, Germany to create the Potsdam Declaration. This ultimatum stated that if Japan did not surrender, the country would face prompt and utter destruction. War Minister Anami, General Umezu, and Admiral Toyo Dewere decided against the declaration, arguing that the terms were too dishonorable and advised the Japanese government to reject it. The Japanese Prime Minister, Suzuki, told the press that Japan's stance was one of mokusatsu, which the United States interpreted as meaning rejection by ignoring. This prompted the United States to act on their promise of utter destruction. The Manhattan Project was the codename for the American scientific effort to create an atomic bomb. President Roosevelt formed the Manhattan Project on December 28, 1942. It was created in response to fears that German scientists had been working on a nuclear weapon since the 1930s. Most of the work was done in Los Alamos, New Mexico, under the direction of J. Robert Oppenheimer. On July 16, 1945, in a remote desert near Morgordo, New Mexico, the first atomic bomb was successfully detonated. This event was called the Trinity Test. It created an enormous mushroom cloud over 40,000 feet high. Scientists at Los Alamos had developed 2 types of atomic bombs by 1945, a uranium-based bomb called Little Boy and a plutonium-based bomb called Fat Man. On August 6, 1945, at 8:15 a.m., the B-29 plane Enola Gay, piloted by Paul W. Tibbets, dropped Little Boy on Hiroshima, Japan. It exploded 1,900 feet over a hospital with over 13 kilotons of force. When the bomb exploded, temperatures over millions of degrees were produced. The light emitted by the bombs was roughly 10 times the brightness of the sun. During the explosion, various types of radiation, such as gamma rays and beta particles, were released. These particles could last years. Hiroshima was annihilated by the explosion. Approximately 80,000 people were killed directly by the blast, and another 35,000 were injured. At least another 60,000 would be dead by the end of the year due to radiation and other injuries. The city of Hiroshima has estimated that at least 237,000 people were killed directly or indirectly by the bomb's effects, including burns, radiation sickness, and cancer. The news of this bomb shocked the world. Harry Truman said on a broadcast to American citizens about the dropping,
"Let there be no mistake. We shall completely destroy Japan's power to make war."
Japan did not surrender immediately after the first bomb. Hirohito and other government leaders were overcome by shock and could not believe that a singular weapon could do so much damage.
Our demand has been, and it remains, unconditional surrender.
Because of their lack of surrender, Truman acted on his promise to destroy Japan's ability to make war. 5 days after Truman's radio announcement at 11:02 a.m., the Boeing B-29 superfortress named Boxcar flew to Japan and dropped the atomic bomb Fat Man on Nagasaki. This bomb exploded 1,800 feet over the city to achieve maximum blast effect. Buildings collapsed. Electrical systems were shorted. It brought a firestorm of winds which uprooted trees and destroyed homes. Flash burns from the heat waves caused most of the casualties. Others were burned when their homes burst into flames or when they were caught by flying debris. The bomb immediately took the lives of 42,000 people and injured 40,000 more. It destroyed 39% of all the buildings standing in Nagasaki. After hearing about the second bombing, Japanese Emperor Hirohito and Prime Minister Suzuki debated until 2 a.m. on August 10th about the future of the war. They decided that they would accept the Potsdam Declaration. Later that day, Hirohito appeared on national radio for the first time to announce Japan's peace with the United States. The United States was notified shortly thereafter.
I deem this reply a full acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration, which specifies the unconditional surrender of Japan.
The United States had accepted Japan's surrender. Overall, the use of the bombs caused a catastrophic amount of damage to the Japanese. Within the first few months after the bombing, it is estimated that between 90,000 and 166,000 people died in Hiroshima, while another 60,000 to 80,000 died in Nagasaki. These deaths include people who died due to the force and excruciating heat of the explosions, as well as deaths caused by radiation exposure. Exposure to radiation can cause near immediate effects by killing cells and directly damaging tissue. Radiation can also have long-term effects such as cancer by causing mutations in the DNA of living cells. These mutations can sometimes take decades to form. This is why a lot of survivors were not diagnosed until years after the bombings. Leukemia was one of the most sudden and deadly cancers experienced by atomic bomb survivors. The Radiation Effects Research Foundation estimated that bomb victims had a 46% chance of having leukemia. The disease was most prevalent between 1949 and 1951. Children were affected most severely. Incidents of other cancers did not appear until around 10 years after the attacks. In Hiroshima, 70,000 out of the 76,000 buildings that existed in the city were destroyed. In Nagasaki, 19,000 buildings out of the 50,000 were destroyed. It took decades to rebuild both cities from the damage. More than 174,589,000 yen had to be distributed to cover the medical costs of victims. General Douglas MacArthur, Supreme Commander of the Allied Powers, was sent to demilitarize Japan. He disbanded the Shinto religion because it was the source of Japan's militaristic lifestyle and drafted a constitution in 1947 to prevent Japan from participating in war. Japan still does not have a military to this day. However, the atomic bombings did result in triumphs as well. Firstly, it led to the expedited ending of the war and prevented the thousands of Japanese and American military deaths if warfare had continued. It also allowed the United States and Japan to make peace. The United States lifted their embargo and provided supplies to help Japan recover. Harry Truman created numerous associations to help aid and perform research for bomb victims. The United States was very gracious with punishments. Emperor Hirohito and the rest of the imperial family were not persecuted for war crimes, and Hirohito was allowed to stay on the throne. Douglas MacArthur helped improve civil rights for Japanese citizens through land reforms and more liberal education. The United States also donated $2 billion to Japan in order to help rebuild their economy. Japan's economy recovered significantly once the war ended. It went on to become the third largest trade and industrial power of the 1960s. Not only that, the United States had provided constant military protection after the war had ended and released more than 70,000 Japanese prisoners of war. In conclusion, the atomic bombs were dropped into Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, in order to stop the conflict between the United States and Japan during World War II. The tragedy of the bomb droppings caused a horrific amount of deaths and damage to Japan and its inhabitants. However, the triumph of these events led to the ending of the war and the reformation of Japan.